Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited about today's video because I'm going to be sharing with you guys these 7 looks that I created using the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. Recently I posted my first impressions on this palette, which I did basically the morning after I got that palette in the mail. I was so excited to break into it and play with it. So in that video I did share with you guys just a simple look that I created using the palette. But I knew when I purchased this palette that I was planning to do 7 looks with this one. I know you guys love these videos. I love doing them as well. You guys know how much I love my eyeshadow palettes, and I was really excited to try out Natasha Denona. I think for a lot of us, Natasha Denona is kind of considered the queen of the eyeshadow palette or eyeshadow formula, partly because her price tag is so significantly higher than so many others out there, but also a lot of people really seem to love her eyeshadow formula. So I was so excited to really test this thing out, and that is what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to share with you guys the 7 looks that I created using this palette, as well as just my overall thoughts and what I thought about this formula. So I hope that you guys are excited about this one. Before we jump into it, make sure you're subscribed to my channel, also hit that notification bell, and let's go ahead and take a look at this palette. So here is the palette right here. This is the outer packaging. It comes in a hard plastic case, but this is very sturdy feeling, which I would expect it to be at the price tag. Really beautiful. I love the color on it. And here is the inside of the palette. You can see I should have cleaned my mirror, but has a very nice large mirror in here, and these are the shades. I'm going to insert a close-up of the packaging and the actual shadow pans for you guys right here so you can get a closer look at them. If you're not a fan of orange tones, red tones, pink tones, or yellow tones, I would just completely skip this thing altogether because you get a lot of those tones in here. As for the shades in here, it includes 8 shimmers and 7 mattes, which I think is a good ratio. I always love a good mix of both. A couple more details about this palette. This is sold at Sephora, also on Natasha Denona's website, and I believe it might also be sold on Beautylish as well. This one retails for $65. This is the most expensive eyeshadow palette I have ever bought. I am typically someone that doesn't like to go over this type of a price point when I'm buying an eyeshadow palette, but I was very pleased to see that the pan size in here is actually not what I would consider small. I think when she announced that this was going to be a smaller version of her larger palettes, I imagined that these might be very small, but they're actually quite large. In fact, if I hold my Anastasia palette up right next to it, you can see that the pans in here are even a little bit bigger than the pans in the Anastasia palettes. In my opinion, I think these are perfectly sized. I wish that she would come out with every single one of her eyeshadow palettes in this size, and then I would actually consider buying more than just this one. This was a little bit painful for my budget, but $120, $128, that is definitely outside of my price range, and I think a lot of people's price range. So that is just some basic information on this palette. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the 7 looks, and then at the end of the video I will share with you guys my thoughts on the palette in general, how it worked for me, what I liked about it, maybe if there's things that I didn't like about it. So if you're interested in that information, be sure to stick around to the very end. But with that out of the way, let's jump into look number 1. hope you guys enjoyed those 7 looks. I had so much fun creating those for you guys. So now I want to get into just my thoughts on this palette in general. How this palette worked for me personally, and if it's something that I would recommend for you guys. First, I want to talk about her eyeshadow formula and how it worked for me, and let's start with the mattes. I really enjoyed her matte formula in here. I didn't really have trouble working with any of these. The only two that I will say I had a hair difficult time blending was this kind of bright pink right here, which I find to be the case with pretty much most bright pinks that I've ever used, including this bright pink in here. I don't think it was difficult, but you had to work a little bit to get it to blend out. It wasn't one of those shades that you could just use any brush, pop it on there, and in 3 seconds have it be blended perfectly. The only other one I think was a tiny bit tricky was this bright orangey yellow right here, and kind of the same thing with this one. It just took a little bit more work to get that to blend nicely. That I think is partly because of the intensity and the vibrancy of the color. Her matte formula is nice and soft. I would say it's not as soft as the Anastasia formula, but it's not quite as firmly pressed as the Juvia's Place formula. I think I might have mentioned this in my first impressions video, but I really feel like her matte formula is right there between an Anastasia formula and a Juvia's Place. Both of those formulas I enjoy. I think they're both very easy to work with and to blend, but one is just a lot softer. As for the shimmers in here, I found them very easy to apply with both a brush and with my finger. I really enjoyed this purple shade right here, and I also really enjoyed these 2 shades right here. You guys might know this because I feel like I talk about it in any eyeshadow video that I ever do, but I always love having a shade in a palette that's going to work for my inner corner, something that's going to be a little bit brightening and a little bit shimmery. These both do a very good job of that. I do think though, if you're extremely fair skinned, these might be a little bit too dark for you. You might want something even lighter to go on your inner corner. I also really loved the range of colors in here. I do kind of wish that there was one more shade that was a little bit darker. This is the darkest shade in the palette. I think it's a beautiful shade. It's very easy to work with. But if you want something dark to smoke out your lash line or your outer V, this is really the only color dark enough to do that. And sometimes it'd be nice to have another option for that. So that's really my biggest complaint. I don't know if I would call it necessarily a complaint, but that's one thing I think this palette could benefit from. As for my thoughts on if I think this formula is worth the price, I am so on the fence about that because I think this is a beautiful formula to work with. If you like investing in high-end eyeshadow palettes, if this color story speaks to you, I think the formula is amazing. I think for most of the looks that I did, I came away feeling like I had better eyeshadow skills than I actually have, which I think a really good palette will do that for you. But do I think that you need this palette in your life? That I think is a hard question to answer, and I have to think about it just based on how I think about palettes in general. I do think this formula is probably better than a ColourPop formula, but I love ColourPop's formula. I think it's awfully close to most of my high-end palettes, but the price difference is so significant that I think if you're budget conscious, I think ColourPop's a great way to go. You may not be able to get this specific palette, but you can probably find similar color stories that are going to save you a whole lot of money. So ultimately, it just comes down to your budget and your preferences. I do think this formula is a little bit better. It does have more pigment and is a little more intense right on the first swipe than the ColourPop formula. I'm just comparing it to ColourPop because that's a great formula that is affordable. But in a way, I kind of feel like we're comparing apples to oranges. They're both shadows, sure, but are ColourPop shadows great? Yes. Are they great for the price? Yes. Are these shadows better? Slightly. Is the price difference worth it? That's the question I think you have to answer for yourself. I really enjoyed playing with this palette. It is definitely not a regret for me. So I think the most important factor, if you are considering this eyeshadow palette, I would say make sure that you love the color selection in here. If you know that you don't like pinks or you don't wear reds or you don't wear oranges very often, I would not get this because that's what predominantly you get inside this palette. But if you know that you like those shades, that you use them a lot, and you're really wanting to try out Natasha Denona's eyeshadow formula, I think that you really would enjoy this one. So one more thing I want to do for you guys is just to show you guys a couple of palettes that I think could be possibly considered similar to this palette in the colors that they offer. Now, I am by no means saying that any of these are dupes. I just think this is something to consider when you're thinking about purchasing an eyeshadow palette. So I'm going to first start off by comparing this one to the Riviera palette. Obviously, these are very, very different palettes. I think there's very few similarities in these two, but I do want to show you a couple of similarities. This shade right here, which is one of my favorite transition shades that I found, is the shade Morgan. It reminds me quite a bit of Coastline, which is one of my favorite transition shades in the Riviera palette. I'm going to just swatch these two next to each other for you guys. These might be the closest that I would say dupes that I have. So here's the Natasha Denona. Here is the ABH one right there. You can see those are very, very close to each other. Other than that, I think the yellows in here are quite different. These ones are much more intense. These are the most intense yellows I have in my collection, but you do still get a beautiful yellow in here. The next palette I want to show you guys in comparison is the ColourPop Through My Eyes palette. Again, very different color stories in here, but we have a couple of similarities. So starting with what I would consider possibly the closest dupe would be this color right here, which is Azalea, which is kind of a peachy rust color. It's a beautiful shade. And then this color right here, which is Mesmerize. Let me show you these two swatched. There they are right there. They're not exactly the same, but they're similar to each other. And I think on the eyes, they will give you a similar look. Also, in my first impressions video, I kind of did a comparison of this shade in here, which is kind of the outer corner shade, the color Clove, to this color in the ColourPop palette. This one is quite a bit darker, but if you combined these two colors together, you get a similar color. I wouldn't call those dupes for each other, but they're quite similar when you put them in your outer corner or on your lash line. I also think this matte orange in the ColourPop palette is similar to these two shades right here. So if you were to combine these two shades, you'd basically get that shade. Let me do that for you guys really quickly. I'm just combining, this is the ColourPop one, and this is the two shades combined in the Natasha Denona one. So you can see those are quite similar to each other. So lastly, I want to compare this to the Urban Decay Born to Run palette. Now, I imagine that these palettes would not be similar to each other because when I think of the Born to Run palette, I think of a wide range of colors. But upon closer glance, if you take out this corner of this palette, you actually get quite a few similarities in here. You can see this kind of pink color is somewhat repeated right there. You can see the oranges are somewhat similar to each other. You get some rusty, bronzy colors, which are somewhat similar to each other. Also, these lid shades are somewhat similar to each other. So let me just swatch a couple of shades for you guys. I'm going to swatch the bronze in here with this bronze right here, which is the color Ignite. This is the color Ignite from Born to Run. And then this is the color Dayspring from Natasha Denona. Quite similar to each other. That is very surprising actually. They don't look that similar in the pan. I think the Urban Decay one has a little bit more of kind of an orangey undertone, whereas this is more of a true neutral bronze. Now let's swatch one more. I just want to swatch the two oranges in here. Baja from Urban Decay. It's one of my favorite transition shades in that palette. And also next to Jasper in Natasha Denona. So again, you guys, I am kind of shocked by how similar these are. They're quite similar to each other. As I'm looking at this and studying it more, I'm actually finding more and more similarities. I want to swatch just a couple more because I know a lot of you do have this Born to Run palette. I'm going to swatch this shade right here, Stranded, in the Born to Run palette. Here it is right there. Next to this shade right here. I kind of think it could be either of these shades. This one's a little more pink, this one's a little more yellow gold. I think Stranded is probably somewhere in between the two, but let's try this color here, Laurel, swatched next to that one. So those aren't exact dupes, but they're somewhat similar to each other. And lastly, let's swatch the pinks in here. So this is the color Glory in Natasha Denona, and this is the color Hellride in Urban Decay. Pretty similar. The Natasha Denona one has a bit more pink in it. It's not quite as deep, whereas the Urban Decay one is just a little bit more dark and deep. Again, you could get somewhat similar looks on your eyes. All right, you guys, so I hope that was helpful. It was actually very enlightening for me. I did not think that I had as many similar shades that are in this palette in my collection. I do want to just end by saying this. I think the one thing this palette has that I don't have in my collection, not to say that it's not out there, are these yellows. These are very unique yellows. They are bold, they are rich, they are intense. If you are into that one color on the lid, then these are absolutely fantastic for that. Whether or not that makes it worth spending $65, that's going to be up to you. But that is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for stopping by today. I know this video is probably going to be a little bit longer one, but I did want to share those comparisons with you guys at the end because I think a lot of us might have the Born to Run palette and may not necessarily need to go buy this one. Let me know if you guys have tried out any of Natasha Denona's eyeshadow palettes, not just this one, what you think about her formula. A lot of people swear by it. I am definitely impressed with it. I will say that. Thank you guys again for stopping by today. Thank you guys for your enthusiasm, for your comments, for your support, just for watching. I appreciate it so much. If you are new here, welcome. I hope that you will stick around, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great day and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye. This is so awkward. Sorry guys.